The only way something can exist in the material world is being imperfect. It is crucial that you internalize this concept. As difficult as it may be to believe, many people waste their lives chasing a false concept called perfection. Trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect parent, the perfect employee, when in reality, they are holding back their true potential, having this perfectionism mindset. There are two types of people: dreamers and high achievers. Dreamers live a fantasy in their minds of what could be. High achievers bring their ideas to reality. The difference between these two types of people is that dreamers focus on perfection. Most of them are too afraid to even try, since they are afraid they may not be able to meet their unreal perfect standards. And some are just a bit more adventurous and do start working on their projects, but usually end up getting lost trying to create perfectness, which causes them to quit eventually or finish too late when their idea is no longer valuable. High achievers, on the other hand, focus on finishing. They value done and deadlines over perfection. It is your decision if you want to bring your dream life to reality or just imagine what could be. Someone else will deliver something with less quality than you and will succeed anyway. Have you wondered at work how someone got to such a top management position when they clearly are not remotely good at their jobs? More often than you think, incompetent people thrive, not because of their outperforming abilities, but because the real competent people are too afraid to apply to those positions, are afraid to speak up their brilliant ideas at meetings, thinking that they are not good enough. Every time you are afraid to open a business, apply for that dream job position because you think you are not perfect enough. Remind yourself that someone less competent than you will take action and will succeed regardless of their inability. You learn more by doing than by preparing or planning. Hasn't it happened to you that you spent a lot of time planning and preparing for something, but when you took action, you realized that most of your preparation and planning was a waste of time? That things differed greatly from what you expected, and that a completely different set of skills was required. There is only so much you can learn by preparing. The real learning happens when you're taking real action. And hey, we're not asking you to always jump to action without having the minimum idea of what you are doing, since obviously some things do require a high specialization level, but most things in life don't. Actually, for some people, this is an unconscious way of procrastinating. Wasting time in planning or preparation is a way to avoid taking action and fooling yourself into thinking that you are taking action. Next time you find yourself spending extra time preparing to do something, remind that past a certain point, you can only really learn by doing. You may read 1,000 recipes on how to bake the perfect cake, but the only actual way to learn how to bake a cake is by baking a cake. Identify the 20% that accounts for 80% of the progress. You most likely be already familiar with the Pareto principle, in which absolutely all things in life are imbalanced, and that most fall under a huge disproportion distribution, like 20% of a company products producing the 80% of the company's revenue, or 20% of the actions you take while studying account for 80% of your learning, and so on. Of course, the percentage is never the exact 80-20 expressed in the Pareto principle. It may be less disproportionate, like 70-30, or even more disproportionate, like 90-10, but it works for explanation purposes. Taking this principle into account, you need to make a big analysis regarding the goal you are advancing towards to. Make a list of all the actions required to get to your goal, and then identify the 20% of actions that make 80% of the goal progress, and the 80% of actions that account for 20% of the progress. Once you have clarified those actions, you need to double down on the 20% of actions that generate 80% of the progress and invest the least possible amount of time on the 80% of actions that account for 20% of the progress. This is critically important since you have to make sure to spend 80% of your time working on the actions that really get you making progress. If you are creating a business presentation, the content of your presentation accounts for 80% of the progress, not the presentation colors or design. Don't invest 50% of the time you take to create a presentation working on the presentation format. As long as the format meets the minimum required standards, no one will give you a raise based on the beautiful infographics included in your presentation, unless graphic design was the topic of your presentation. Perfectionism keeps you stuck, and perfectly finished moves you to the next level. The average perfectionist spends time doing perfectionist tasks, thinking that by trying to deliver almost perfect deliverables is getting closer to his or her goals. But in fact, it is the opposite. The more time you spend doing perfectionist tasks, the further you're getting from achieving your goals. Let's say your goal in life is becoming rich, and that you are working on building your small business. Every time you overspend time in a task because of a perfectionist anxiety, recall that doing that is pulling you away from becoming rich. This change in perspective will shift your mindset into pushing yourself to get things done instead of getting stuck in perfectionism. Always focus on the positive, not on the negative. Just as we mentioned in the previous point, your aim should always be to keep moving forward. Focusing on the positive helps you keep moving forward, especially in tough times. Remember that your mindset is shaped after the emotions and attitudes you feed it with. The more you focus on negative things, the more negative things your mind will seek. Negative individuals focus on the distance ahead, while positive people celebrate the progress they've made. Negative people focus on the problems. Positive people focus on what works well. Negative people are afraid of making mistakes. Positive people focus on learning. Start practicing a positive mindset and you'll move forward faster than you expect. Stop waiting for the perfect scenario to take action. People like to think the perfect scenario to do what they want to do exists, but it doesn't. Remember that perfect does not exist. There will be absolutely no scenario in which all stars align for you to take a certain action. There will always be something that won't meet your expectations, and you cannot allow that to stop you from taking action. No one can predict the future and assure that anything they do will eventually succeed. But here is a prediction based on real statistics. Whenever someone waits for the perfect scenario to take action, usually always end up not taking any action. Don't try to escape failure. Plan for it. It is coming. As silly as it sounds, there are people that think failure can be avoided, or the sole idea of failure causes so much anxiety to them that they decide to look the other way. Failure can't be avoided. It is actually part of success, so you'd better start embracing it. Plan for situations that could go wrong, because something most likely will go wrong. If it doesn't happen, great. If it does, you are already prepared. Especially psychologically. It won't feel like it is the end of the world, since you had already foreseen it, and therefore, more than a failure, it will feel like part of the scripted plan you wrote. This approach minimizes stress and assures your survival. If you open a business and foresee that there could be a month in which you won't make enough money to cover for basic expenses like rent, wages, etc., you'll create a special fund that could cover for that if it occurred. It would feel like a regular scripted situation you plan to face, instead of hoping for the best, which could get you in debt and put your business at risk of going bankrupt. Take an example of perfection, then find as many defects as you can. We all have that someone or something that we consider an example of perfection, something that we take as a role model in our heads that promotes our perfectionist behavior, like that person you consider has the best style on earth and that could not possibly look wrong with anything. That false idea make you try to emulate his or her style to always feel like no matter how much time and effort you invest, it will be impossible to match the greatness level of one of his or her outfits. That perfection is just in your mind. And one way to help you open your eyes is to take an example of perfection according to you and exclusively look for defects. We know it will be hard at the beginning since your biased thinking prevents you from seeing the flaws. But as soon as you start finding defects, it will be hard to stop and you'll find more defects than you can think of. Let's say you decided to do the exercise with your favorite movie, a piece of art that will be hard to match in history. You could start by looking up on the internet all the visible scene mistakes, like when a microphone or a cameraman that was not supposed to be part of the shot is in the shot. The whole point is making you realize that besides all those inconceivable mistakes, the studio did not prevent the movie from premiering. They did not postpone and put millions of dollars at risk to go back and reshoot those scenes. Next time you realize you have spent 20 minutes editing an email, recall the multi-million-dollar movie that was premiered and became a success besides the many obvious mistakes incurred. Force yourself to deliver imperfect work. This is the next level to reset your mind to focus on progress and never on perfection. Here, we want to retake the email example of the previous point, in which you suddenly notice you have wasted an unreasonable amount of time reading, rephrasing, looking for orthographic mistakes, and decided to just send it as is. In the previous point's exercise, you stop going over the email and send it. Now, you'll go a step further. You will add a mistake to the email and send it with the mistake. Of course, it has to be something irrelevant, not sending the wrong sales numbers, something like a typo, regardless of all the important people that are copied in the email. We know this could be very difficult for a perfectionist, but it helps you understand it won't be the end of the world. That imperfection is part of existence. Even senior directors and managers send emails with typos, and that does not interfere with their outstanding results. Stop wasting time in what doesn't create value. Invest more time in what does, and internalize that done is better than an abandoned dream. Thanks for watching.